Welcome to The Critique. Today we're looking at a commentary piece analyzing the conflict between Candace Owens and Nick Fuentes over their Jeffrey Epstein statements.
Right. And it also digs into the credibility of both of them. It's a heavy topic, a lot of internet drama, so let's just dive in.
Let's do it. First up, I want to look at the overall style of the argument. There's this clear desire to expose how absurd these figures are, but the way it's done, it leans pretty heavily into just calling them names.
Yeah, that's the topic sentence right there. The piece effectively identifies hypocrisy, but frequently undermines its own authority by relying on repetitive insults rather than letting the evidence speak for itself.
And as I read through the notes, the argument is that the text keeps coming back to labels like insane, idiots, dingbats, lunatic.
Exactly. And you have to wonder, what's the cost of using that vocabulary? I mean, the author's disdain is crystal clear, but these words show up so often, they actually crowd out the real analysis. Like, for instance, the author calls Owens a liar and also insane about her Charlie Kirk time travel theory. But focusing on the insult, it actually weakens the point. The absurdity of the claim itself is so much stronger.
It is.
And you see this emotional venting. Phrases like, it offends my senses, taking over, the logical deconstruction of what's actually happening.
I see exactly what you mean. It feels less like a structured critique and more like the author is just, venting to a friend.
Right.
So how do we make this stronger? What's the suggestion here?
The move is to shift the focus. Stop labeling them and just describe their contradictory behavior. Let the audience be the one to conclude that they're insane.
The classic show, don't tell.
It's classic for a reason. It professionalizes the tone. You want the listener thinking, wow, that person is completely unhinged without you having to shout it at them.
Okay, I really like that. It treats the audience like they're intelligent enough to connect the dots. So let's get into some concrete examples of how you'd actually do that.
Sure. So instead of the line, I don't like Candy, she sounds like an actual lunatic, which is what the text has now.
Right.
You could restructure it to highlight the contrast. Something like, Owens positions herself as a moral arbiter on trafficking, yet simultaneously promotes theories that require a complete suspension of reality, such as Charlie Kirk being a time traveler.
See, that's different. One is an insult. The other is just a devastating comparison of her credibility.
Exactly. It makes a strong case for her being unreliable, without sounding petty.
Okay, so what about the critique of Fuentes? The text calls him a Glee Club kid and one of the idiots eating themselves alive.
So for that, you build on the same idea. Instead of just Glee Club kid as a standalone insult, you have to tether it to the political point you're making about performance.
Okay.
And rephrase that idiots eating themselves alive part. Focus on the cannibalistic nature of fringe political movements. That sounds like political science.
Right, whereas idiots eating themselves just sounds like what, Twitter drama?
Exactly.
That brings up a good question, though. The piece is clearly passionate, right? The author is angry at these people. If we sanitize the language too much, if we take out dingbat and lunatic, do we risk losing the author's voice?
That's a fair point, but I'd argue that refining the language actually amplifies. Right now, the author's voice is sort of struggling to be heard over the noise of all the insults. When you use a term like dingbat, you're just preaching to the choir. Only people who already hate them will agree. But if you present the time travel theory or the cannibalistic infighting as objective facts, you might actually reach the skeptics. You gain authority. The anger is still there. It's just, it's channeled into a laser instead of a shot.
That's a great distinction. It's about channeling that anger into actual effectiveness.
Yeah.
Speaking of effectiveness, let's move to the second critique. The material contains a unique and compelling psychological insight regarding theater boys and performance politics, but it is currently buried amidst the general ranting about Epstein.
Yes, this is the part that really jumped out at me. This incredible sociological observation that heterosexual men cannot continue to follow theater boys, and that figures like Fuentes are playing the part of men while actually being Glee Club kids who would never fight a war.
I agree. It felt like a moment of real, startling clarity. But then it just kind of vanishes.
Right. And it's currently sandwiched between a discussion about a suicide note in France and a complaint about the audience. The connection between Fuentes leading people into the Capitol with a bullhorn, which is pure performance, and his background in theater, it's there, but it's loose.
It's treated like a side comment.
Not the main course.
So the suggestion here is to elevate this performance versus reality idea. Make it the central pillar of the critique against Fuentes, not just a passing comment.
Precisely. If you frame the entire critique of Fuentes through that lens, everything else just clicks into place.
Okay, let's brainstorm a few concrete ways to actually restructure that.
Well, you could create a dedicated section. Title it something like The Performativity of Radicalism. Then you group all the evidence of his acting together. You've got the Glee Club background, the bullhorn at the Capitol, where he, gives instructions but somehow avoids getting arrested.
And even the dramatic clips the author admits to enjoying like they're the Real Housewives.
Yes, exactly. And then you explicitly contrast the seriousness of the topic, Epstein, trafficking, with the theater of the commentator. Fuentes saying, I don't want to be the one to say it, that's a scripted line.
It's pure melodrama.
Right. So you frame the argument that Fuentes treats these grave moral failings as just a script for engagement. That validates the whole theater boy theory. You're no longer just saying he's wrong about Epstein. You're arguing his entire political persona is a stage play, which is way more damning.
It really is. It transforms the observation from like a throwaway line about his high school hobbies into a full-blown diagnosis of his political danger. That is much, much stronger.
And it connects to the Fed trap allegation, too. If he's performing, well, who's the director? It makes the federal informant accusation feel like part of the cast list, not just some random conspiracy theory.
It turns the whole theater comment from a petty jab into a profound structural critique of that entire political move.
That's it.
It really does feel like the author stumbled upon a gold mine with that theater boy comment, but didn't quite realize its value. If you centralize it, the piece becomes more than just a reaction video. It becomes a sociological study.
100%. And if someone argues that his background is irrelevant, you can say that because the critique is about his credibility as a leader of men, his background and performance is actually the most relevant piece of evidence there is. It explains the disconnect between his rhetoric, war, fighting, and his reality, which is Glee Club and performance.
Let's move to the third point. The comparison between Owens attacking Fuentes while she defends Andrew Tate is a really strong logical lever, but the execution, it suffers from a bit of whataboutism drift.
Yes, this is a classic issue in these kinds of scripts. You have a great point, but then you get distracted by the larger culture war. The author tries to expose Owens' hypocrisy by mentioning her defense of Andrew Tate, which is good.
But then it drifts into this whole tangent about society changing definitions of what it means to be a boy and a girl.
I noticed that.
And it just muddies the waters.
By pivoting to this general societal complaint saying, we're just trying to maneuver our way and change these definitions, the author loses the specific thread about Owens' inconsistency on trafficking allegations.
It becomes a rant about society.
And not a critique of Candace Owens.
So the suggestion is to tighten that up. Keep the focus strictly on the parallel between the Epstein accusations and the Andrew Tate accusations. Make the charge of hypocrisy totally irrefutable.
Exactly. You want to remove any escape hatch for the listener. If you bring in gender definitions, they start thinking about gender politics. You want them thinking about trafficking hypocrisy, period.
Okay, give me a concrete example of how to sharpen that comparison.
You could draft a direct parallel structure, something like Owens draws a hard line on Fuentes' minimization of Epstein's technical legality, yet she affords similar leniency to Andrew Tate regarding trafficking allegations.
That's a laser beam.
It is.
And the whole section on gender?
You cut it, or you condense it significantly unless it's explicitly tied to something Owens herself said in this specific context. The current phrasing, we're just trying to maneuver our way, it feels like the author is debating the listener or, screaming at the clouds.
Yeah.
Just stick to the trafficking comparison. It's stronger, it's cleaner, and it's much harder to refute.
This feels like a really important lesson for anyone writing commentary. When you find a clear contradiction, like the Tate and Epstein hypocrisy, you have to hold on to it. The second you bring in other grievances, you just dilute how potent that original point is.
For sure. And think about it from the listener's perspective. They're nodding along, right? They see the logic. She attacks X for trafficking, but defends Y for trafficking. It's a logical lock. But the moment the author throws in, and also society is confused about gender, the listener has to switch gears entirely. It breaks the flow. It's much better to be narrow and deep than broad and shallow in a segment like this.
It keeps the focus on the specific moral failing discussed. Okay, let's look at the end. The conclusion of the piece suffers from a pretty jarring tonal shift that undermines everything that came before it.
Yeah, this was quite a ride. After talking about child trafficking, federal informants, Moral decay, the piece just abruptly pivots to promoting a Ben Shapiro music video
Me and my tiny horse.
and calls it a banger.
I have to admit, I got serious tonal whiplash there. 1 minute we're on a suicide note from a French prison. The next minute, it's a tiny horse.
Right. And while the intent is probably to mock Owens, since it's on her platform, the transition is just way too sudden. It ends up trivializing the 10 minutes of serious analysis about, horrible, disgusting, perverted crime.
It feels like the author just got bored and changed the channel. You want to end on a high note or, a moment of levity, but it still has to fit the narrative. So let's see. What's the suggestion here?
You have to separate the serious moral critique from the ironic enjoyment of the clown world. If you have to include the music video, you need to frame it as the final piece of evidence of the absurdity you mentioned earlier, not just as a funny thing to watch.
Okay, so give us a concrete example of how you'd frame that.
Well, you could frame the Shapiro video as the punchline to that theater boy thesis we were just talking about.
Oh, that's good.
You could say something like, this movement ends not with policy, but with music videos about tiny horses. This is the ultimate proof that it is all just performance art.
That ties it all back together beautifully.
Or, alternatively, just move the music video mention. Put it in a distinct postscript or on a lighter note section so it doesn't bleed into the final moral condemnation. You have to make sure the very last sentence returns to the gravity of the main issue, which the author said was the exploitation of the audience.
So you could say something like, and while Ben Shapiro's rapping about horses, their audience is being let off a cliff.
Exact. That maintains the tonal consistency. It says, look at this circus, instead of, hey guys, look at this cool song. It keeps the author in the position of the serious critic, not just another consumer of the content.
That's a really crucial distinction. It preserves the authority of the voice.
It really does. I mean, you spend the whole piece establishing that you're the sane one in a room full of lunatics. Don't end it by dancing with them.
That is a fantastic way to put it.
So when you look back at the whole thing, the raw material is very strong. The author has a clear moral compass. They see through the grift. Our goal here is just to align the structure and tone to really match that insight.
Right. The author sees the forest, the performance, the hypocrisy. We just need to clear away some of the trees, like the name-calling and the tangents that are blocking the path for the listener.
That's it exactly.
So to recap the main points for our listener, first, replace the ad hominem attacks, the lunatic and dingbat stuff, with behavioral descriptions that just show the contradictions.
Right. Let the facts do the work.
Second, structure that theater politics insight as the core thesis of the entire piece. It is your strongest asset.
It's the anchor, for sure.
Third, tighten up the hypocrisy arguments. Remove those tangents about gender definitions. Keep it clean.
And finally, manage that tonal shift at the end. Make the music video serve the argument instead of distracting from.
That sums it up. There is a really great piece of commentary hiding inside this rant. We just need to chisel away the excess emotion to reveal it.
I would love to see a version of this where the theater boy theory is the headline. It would be a fascinating.
We invite you to refine the script based on these suggestions. The raw materials are all there. The passion, the knowledge, the evidence. With a little restructuring, this could be a really devastating critique.
Can't wait to see it.
Please resubmit the work for a follow-up once you've made those edits. We look forward to seeing how it evolves. That's all for this critique. Keep writing, keep refining, and we'll see you next time.